Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening in some cases. Thank you for joining us for the fourth part of our Pathways to Prosperity webinar by Vanguard Communications. Glad to have you with us. And in some cases, I think it may be good morning. I want to point out that we are working now with IVF Worldwide, one of the leading website organizations devoted to in vitro fertilization medicine, and we are delighted to have some members of that group joining us from around the globe. It may be the next day for some of you, in which case I want to say thank you for being up so early in the morning to participate. Our webinar today is entitled Blogs and Social Media, the Why and How for Doctors, and it will be presented by the very talented Dr. Rink Murray of Chattanooga, Tennessee, here in the United States. I want to stress that if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to chat them in the sidebar to the left of your screen, and we will try to address them during the Q&A part of the webinar. We've left lots of time for that for later, some Q&A for later. We will also have an ongoing Twitter feed with the hashtag Pathways by Vanguard. So if you'd like to join the conversation that way, that's yet another venue. I'm Ron King. I'm CEO of Vanguard. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Murray, who has considerable experience both as a physician as well as a journalist before his current career in medicine. And he is a great writer, and I say that in all circumstances. Even if he were not a client, I should disclose he is a client, but he would be a great writer if he weren't that, and he's a terrific blogger, one of the best I've ever come across. So with that, Dr. Murray, I should mention that he is also an award-winning reproductive endocrinologist at Tennessee Reproductive Medicine, having earned an English degree from Colorado College. He embarked on a career in journalism, first as an editor at PC Magazine in New York City, and later he became a reporter for the Chattanooga News Free Press, where he won the National Association of Consumer Affairs Advocates Award for Best Reporting. He's received numerous awards for hospital staff, patients, and residents for his dedication to teaching and delivering outstanding, compassionate, and ethical care. And he's been elected into America's Best Doctors every year following his first year in practice.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, Ron. Thanks for having me. Welcome, everybody. My first slide, let me pull it up here. Not that one, but this one. You are a blogger. Well, I can tell you right now, I don't consider myself a blogger. I think Ron does. And he was kind enough and gracious enough to always encourage me to write more. I really consider myself someone who shares useful information with patients and with doctors. But I guess I did get a start sort of in blogging, but it was really kind of by necessity. I mean, when I became a physician, I had no idea that there was even such a thing as blogging. But to kind of understand where I'm coming from, I thought I would just kind of share a little bit of the story of how I got to do what I do and why we do what we do. We opened our medical practice. We decided to open it in 2007. My partner was a senior fellow at Chapel Hill, where I'd graduated 2 years earlier. So I was in Memphis, Tennessee, and we wanted to move to Chattanooga and open a practice. So we secured all sorts of business loans, more than $1 million, hired staff, spent virtually all our money on our lab, and moved to Chattanooga and opened our doors in October 2008. I don't know if any of you remember that, but that's right after this happened. Lehman Brothers Bank collapsed, and that caused this to happen. This is the stock market, and actually that blue line should be moved over a little bit to the left. We opened our clinic right in the middle of a free-falling economy that would remain suppressed for a number of years. To make matters worse, the jobless rate, or the unemployment rate, began to skyrocket, and pretty much everyone was anxious. Very few people seemed to be, especially in this area where a lot of jobs were lost, were really at that point looking to start a new family. So you put us into this mix. We'd never run a business before, much less a medical practice. We were in a new town where neither of us had practiced medicine before. Um, and being a new clinic, we didn't have any success rates to hang our hats on. To make matters worse, there was a clinic already in town which had a large referral base, and so we had some hills to climb. Uh, our first this is a typical day in our waiting room when we first opened. Our first day, I think we saw 4 patients, and this waiting room and this experience actually gave me a lot of time to sit down. I had to do something with my time, so blogging was something I did. And again, you'll see in a minute that not all of it is really blogging, but it also is. Um, a few years later, we were actually having a conversation with Ron and the marketing team just a few weeks ago, and Ron was asking us how our practice was going, and this is a direct quote from my partner, and she said, "I'm happy with our current patient load. If we didn't get any bigger, I'd be okay with that." That's a big change because there were 2 years during the first 2 years when I got my Social Security summary, which not all of you, if you're not in the United States, you don't get one of these. It tells you how much you owed, how much you earned. My first 2 years, I got big goose eggs, $0 earned for 2 years, meaning we were basically paying ourselves out of our loans. But how did we do this? How did we go from a very paltry clinic? Now, some of this was the economy improving, and nothing. I can't give credit to any one thing, but I can tell you the stuff that we wrote and either got into the hands directly of doctors and also put it online. We got into patients. We could see visibly how it was building our practice. And, today, even now, people come to us and say, we looked at a lot of different clinics and we came to you because we read your blog. That happens once a week. Doctors refer to us because some of our blogs directed toward them are very helpful to them in their practice, and they've allowed their medical practices to get better, and in turn, they're very eager to send us patients as well. So a lot of doctors, and not everybody may be in a position where they're having to build a big practice like this. And, of course, I think that anyone who is at this lecture probably is interested in always growing their practice. But there are a lot of objections to medical blogging. And if you ask me, do I want to be a medical blogger? These would be some of mine. Well, not this first one, but a lot of people say, I'm not a writer. Okay. Or I don't have the time. I don't know what to write about. These are all things that my partner has actually said to me at times. It seems too self-promotional. That's something that I would worry about. I don't want to be self-promotional, or no one will read it. Okay, now, before I talk about how all these are untrue or irrelevant, we should really look at the consequences of not blogging. And if your practice is going well, it still could go better with a little bit of more information coming out from a practice. So if you don't blog, you let somebody else be the expert. Okay. And in 2015, there was a study that showed there were 5 billion medical searches per month. That's 5 billion. Okay. So rather than, or maybe in addition to seeking information from their doctor, patients were relying on Dr. Google. As a matter of fact, only 4% of medical search results were actually physician-generated content. A lot of these things were websites that may have had some other agenda or were very generic. So sometimes that information is accurate, sometimes it is not. But if you do blog, you get to be the resource, okay? And as a matter of fact, some of our information that we've put online is now, when you Google it, you get a Tennessee Reproductive Medicine link. So the other thing, if you don't blog, you let your competitor be a key resource for referring doctors. Before we opened our practice, there was another clinic in town, and really all everybody knew of interpreting any fertility test or any fertility situation was what that group told them. Now, we had an advantage with doctors, because doctors, if they sent us a patient, they could see that we had a different approach, which might be more beneficial to the patient. But how do you reach those patients? Those patients aren't the patients who aren't being referred to you by other doctors. If you can put it online about your approach, share some of the things you do, then and be very concrete by telling patient stories, then that's when patients begin to see, hey, I've got an opinion from Dr. A, but Dr. B, look, he's saying we could do all these potential other things. Maybe I'll go have a conversation. So you're also missing the opportunity to establish trust before your first encounter. And I can't tell you how wonderful this is when patients come to us and say, I've read your blog. I know you understand where I'm coming from, and I know you understand me. They already have this level of connection with you, as if you've already had a meeting before. And they're not, the first meeting is not as much of a get to know you meeting. Is this someone I can trust? You've already given them a piece of yourself. The final thing, of course, is you miss, and this is an important one for a lot of people, and this can't be under stress. You miss an opportunity to drive up web traffic and visibility in the market. Your blog or your website and Google are the way patients find you. I mean, we don't advertise in the yellow pages and phone books or newspapers, very little in any other media, and so anytime somebody does a web search and finds you, Google picks up your web ranking, and you become a higher and higher web ranking. And if people are staying on your web page because it's interesting and what you have to say is good, then all of that is good for your web traffic. And Ron can talk more about that. Of course, I found this to be true. Now, why doctors should blog, patient education that can save time in the exam room and address big topics. Now, in our field, we have a lot of ethical topics that we sometimes have to go over. And we do take the time in clinic, but a conversation is a lot of times it can be overwhelming for a patient with all the choices they have to make. And if you can direct them to your website afterwards, say, hey, listen, I'd really like you to go read this. We wrote extensively about this. It can really help them when they get home, review the information and understand it. This is I think is a lot better than just simply giving a patient a handout. I mean, ACOG, all these medical organizations develop handouts to give doctors. But I do think there's some benefit for the patient to understand your approach. It's not wrong to give them information from an organization because, that gives validity to what you say. But if you can get them on your website, again, it drives up web traffic, and you can link to these other organizations on your website if you need to. This is sort of the same thing as the last slide, so I'm going to skip that. But one thing personally, what I found is this, blogging really helps clarify my thinking. Okay, if I write about something, I really have to make the hippo dance, and this is one of my favorite expressions from writing. There's a podcast in America called Radio Lab, and they take very complex scientific ideas and make them light and nimble and kind of easy to navigate and understand. And these are things people do all the time in exam rooms. They try to make analogies. But when you sit down to write, it actually forces you to kind of come up with more of these. And it gives you the time to come up with more of these so that when you are in a situation with a patient and you're trying to explain something a little bit more difficult, you've been down this road before in a thoughtful manner when you had quiet time to think about it. So this is something that, emotional benefits for your patient, emotional support for your patients. In the end, this is something that a lot of our patients really get from our blogs. We don't just tell about our personal experience. We will tell about other patients' experience, patients we failed, patients whose decisions we had trouble making. We talk about the nuts and bolts of what it's like to be a doctor. So we write about our struggles. We write about how other people have managed their struggles. And really, this is important to put on your website, I think, because especially in things like cancer or when there are difficult diagnoses being discussed, at the end of the day, what do people really want? They only want a handful of things from their doctors. They want to be treated with competence, and they want compassion. They want results. But deep down, what everybody really wants is to be understood. And if you write about personal things and struggles people have gone through, and you can show through that you understand what it's like to sit in the chair they're sitting in, then this is a great salve to these patients. One of my favorite blogs that I ever wrote was about a patient I failed, and I've written variations of this a couple of times. What did I learn from a bad outcome? And to patients' credit, they appreciate that probably just as much, if not more, sometimes than stories of your successes, because success is easy to deal with, but failure, that's where they really need help. So emotional support from a blog, if you're really honest and have integrity and write it from that perspective, I think that can be great for patients. So, of course, this is something when we were going through, and quite frankly, we needed practice growth, okay? And blogging, in the beginning, I didn't think of it as blogging, and I'll tell you why. When we first opened our practice, we spent a lot of time going to see referring doctors and trying to meet them and tell them who we were. But we also gave them a lot. We gave them clinical pearls. We would write these 1 to 2 page summaries of pitfalls in day 3 FSH testing, or what does progesterone really mean, or how to interpret this test. And they took some things that had some subtlety and things that people were often misinterpreting, and put it in their hands. And we gave them a piece of us and a piece of what we do. We also gave them algorithms, things that they could do, things that we do. Okay, and I remember one doctor saying, you shouldn't do this. You're just going to give away your business. But the truth of the matter is, that didn't happen. These doctors who we gave all this information to actually started referring us lots of patients. Not only did they understand now what we were doing and why we were doing it because we gave them this testing, not only did we give them tools to better understand and how to educate their patients and make them better doctors in our field, but they also knew kind of what we would be doing. And at the end of the day, OBGYNs did not want to be doing infertility, not most of them anyway. And there's a guy named Robert Cialdini. He wrote a book called The Power of Persuasion, and he's one of the nation's leading researchers in why people do what they do. It turns out if you give something to somebody else without expecting anything in return and without asking for it, they are far more likely to do something in return for you. So the advice we got not to share what we do or how we do, to give away some of our secrets, it was totally false. And these were blogs. I didn't think of them as blogs, but quite frankly, they were blogs just with a different audience. The other thing, the benefits is you reach patients. I'll get to this in a little bit, but if you may have the greatest analogies, you may have the greatest stories to tell, and you could tell them to one patient at a time, but you could also tell those to many patients at a time and have a far greater reach, which will only bring people to your practice. So visibility on Facebook and Twitter, and that's something that Ron has actually really helped us with. He's helped get our blogs into the hands of people who otherwise would not have seen them. But how do you do this? How do you blog? Well, you've got to pick topics. You've got to find the time. Writing style does matter probably. There's some technology needed, and then you have to have, do you allow readers to comment or not? And then, of course, this last one's a little bit nebulous, but it's finding your voice, finding, like, who are you as a writer physician?